Canadian media organization True North, which has been granted one-on-one interviews with Pam Palmater and whose managing editor is now trying to run for the Conservatives in an upcoming election, just published an interview that I want to warn you is one of the most horrifying things I've seen from them. The podcast is called The Faulkner Show, and it's hosted by True North's Harrison Faulkner, who you might remember from my past reporting. And in the episode, he interviews a former residential school worker about what he called the quote-unquote truth that there were, quote, some good things that came from the residential school system, and their terror at the idea it could hypothetically become illegal to say so.
To make it a crime to state the truth. That being, in fact, there were some good things that came from the residential school system.
If you didn't already know, residential schools were a cultural genocide that Canada and the church perpetrated against Indigenous people. Thousands of witnesses have come forward and shared painful, harrowing accounts of what they endured in these institutions. Now, Spotify has a policy where they say they don't permit hate speech. But according to Pam Palmater, a Mi'kmaq lawyer, professor, and activist, that's what this podcast, she thinks, is promoting. Palmater told me, quote, for every atrocity that has occurred around the world, there have always been deniers who scoff at the legal findings of genocide. The deniers' claims are not based on an evidentiary record of fact, law, or investigative findings by expert inquiries and commissions. She adds that for the residential school deniers, Indigenous peoples could never have suffered enough physical and sexual abuse, torture, starvation, medical experimentation, or deaths to be considered worthy of acknowledgement or respect. The deniers are a dime a dozen, and as far as I'm concerned, can go join their comrades, the flat earthers. You said it, Pam. There is no doubt that these residential schools existed, were abusive and racist, and that children died there. And this isn't some distant, far-flung thing. The last residential school closed in 1996, and the legacies of this systematic effort to destroy a people and their culture are still very present, particularly in the foster care system, where Indigenous children are still ripped away from their families and communities and shamefully overrepresented. Now, I've reached out to Harrison's boss and to Spotify about this. I'll update you if they respond. But until then, what do you think of all this?